Welcome, everybody. I'm super excited to have my good friend, also another agency owner here, Kiley Newbold, on the call today. This is for our podcast, Uncovered. We'll also publish it on our blog here. But excited to have you chat with me today, man. Thanks for coming on.
Yeah. I'm excited, Tim. We've known each other for a while now, and I was excited when you were telling me about the podcast. So honored and excited to join you today.
Dude, I'm pumped to get into it. And we were just chatting beforehand and we were like, what should this call be about? What should the agenda be? And honestly, I think we're going to be all over the place in a good way today with a lot of different topics, and we'll see where it goes. So bear with us here, everybody. But yeah, man, let's jump into it. For those who don't know, which should be a very small percentage of the population, for those who don't know who Kiley Newbold is, can you give a quick elevator pitch overview, shameless plug, whatever, about what you do?
Yeah, I'll give it a quick background. So I'm a marketer, entrepreneur, husband, father, trail runner. I don't know. That's a list of things that I am. I've created an agency called Silver Street Marketing back in 2016 that caters specifically to real estate investors. We do some agent work as well. So that's kind of my space in the REI world. Previous to that, I've marketed in a lot of different realms. I was part of the Color Run. I've been part of mobile technology startups, et cetera. And I don't know how deep you want to go into that story of how I got into REI, but that's kind of the quick background. I'm based out of Salt Lake City, Utah. The team that I work with, we're distributed, so we're all over. JT, who's my right hand guy, he's here in Salt Lake City, and then we've got people kind of spread out as well. So we've probably managed ads for, I don't know, several hundred investors over the years. Started with Facebook, and then we do some PPC as well. Facebook's been our bread and butter for since the beginning.
Sweet, man. Okay, yeah. So fellow agency owner, arguably a competitor as well. Like technically we are competitors here, but fun rivalry a little bit. So let's start off on the marketing. That's kind of the easy low-hanging fruit there for sure. And what I'm curious about, and I'm happy to share my answer to this question as well, but like, what do you see? Well, let me ask you this, like, what is the biggest challenge that you find investors have with marketing that you work with specifically, like that ones who have trouble?
I think probably if I had to pick one, it would be, oh man, I'm torn between two. So I'm going to tell you both, and then I'm going to cheat a little. So one of them would be knowing what their expectations should be. So that can mean a few things, but I think primarily it's that a lot of investors will come in. They don't really know how much they can or should spend in order to get a lead. They don't know how many leads they should get in order to get a deal. And all of that can vary a little bit from investor to investor, of course. But I think that's one of the big challenges is because then emotion kind of takes in, and emotion is calling the shots. Emotion is determining whether something is working or not versus data. And then I think the other big challenge is consistency. Because, and they're pretty connected, because if you don't know your numbers, then you are more likely maybe to get distracted or to give up or to quit or to keep going maybe when you shouldn't. So that consistency is a big challenge as well.
I find that for my own business, I mean, people probably wonder what like turnover is like. And, you know, I'll admit, like, we have a good percentage. I don't know the exact percent off the top of my head, but probably 30 to 50% of our clients eventually leave. You know, it's like maybe agency owners don't want to talk about that very much, but just from my personal experience, I'm okay sharing it because you have to understand the reasons why it happens. And honestly, most of the time, it's not because the campaign wasn't doing its job. It's because they didn't give it, like you were saying, the expectations are off. They don't give it enough time. We had a client who just quit after a month, and you know, we tell people when they sign up and we have them like sign contracts. Like you need to do at least 3 months here. And
Yeah.
they even got a deal and they still end up leaving, for whatever reason. And even the campaigns that are super successful, people leave because they're loyal to other, agencies or whatnot and things like that. So I'm curious, what your take on like, why people kind of leave agencies, and what your experience has been there.
Yeah, for sure. So I think there are a few reasons. One of those is their perception of whether or not it's working, right? Which, like you said, is often much more complex than just, oh, this campaign isn't working. I think some people agency hop because they are always trying to find maybe a slightly cheaper deal, or they know somebody or whatever. So I see some of that. I think some people, as they grow, are trying to balance the idea of what do I outsource and what do I bring in-house. So sometimes people will decide to bring something in-house that they've been outsourcing as well. And then sometimes people run out of money or their business isn't working in general. And so they are probably letting go of a lot of things, including, their marketing agency. So I think oftentimes people will come to a marketing agency and look at that agency as sort of the answer, and so they come in with that expectation of like, this is what's going to take my business to the next level. And working with a good agency can definitely play a huge role in that, because if you have a great marketing channel, PPC, Facebook, or if you're working with a direct mail agency or whatever, that's awesome. But I think what oftentimes is missing too is the foundation of your business has to be there. So if you're sort of struggling to close deals or transition a lead to a offer in a deal in one marketing channel, the likelihood that you can just change to another marketing channel and have it work is, I think, probably not very high. Yeah. You'll continue to have those same challenges, right? So for example, one of the big things I see is the follow-up. Especially if you're a smaller operation, it can become pretty challenging to stay on top of following up with leads. And when the market is hot and there are a lot of other investors, then the time to follow up, the consistency and the persistence of follow-up are so critical that I've worked with a lot of investors in the past that had like a backlog of leads because they didn't have the system or the manpower to get to them. And then by the time they got to them, all sorts of things were up, like the lead was no longer interested, or maybe the lead had moved on or whatever. And so their perception, so their perception is like, oh, this isn't really working. But the reality is there's other issues going on that are impacting that,
especially for Facebook advertising, because the leads there are typically, I don't know, I'll put words in your mouth, but I feel like they're typically lower quality compared to like SEO or pay-per-click. They're cheaper. The leads are cheaper, but often lower quality, or maybe not lower quality, but they take more nurture time to follow up and will require more attention. Would you agree with that?
Yeah. So I would say they're at a different point in the decision-making process, right? So if you think of the decision-making as a funnel, like someone who is actively searching in Google or whatever, like, how do I sell my house for cash, or who's a good investor to sell my house to, or whatever they're searching, they are actively looking for a solution. And you can find those people on Facebook too when you leverage customized data, but you are also casting a wider net on Facebook, where you're going after people who are maybe what we call maybe they're not solution aware, meaning they're not really aware of what it means to sell your house to an investor, or it could be that they're still becoming problem aware. Like they're like in the early stages of inheriting a home that they're not quite sure what they're going to do with. Maybe they don't know that it's going to be a challenge or a problem for them yet. So yeah, you're right on. Like it does require some additional nurturing. Now, if you stack your campaigns intelligently, Facebook can help you do a lot of that work of nurturing, but your ability to build a relationship with someone, follow up with them, et cetera, is critical. So we actually give people a similar expectation when they come on board. It sounds like we tell people like, you got to give it 90 days at least. And that's because the candidly, the Facebook algorithm needs time to get going. It's just the way Facebook kind of works. You can start generating leads much faster than that. Like, it shouldn't take 90 days to generate a lead. You're going to be generating leads during that time, but for one to go from that first contact all the way through to close deal, like, that's a good time frame. And certainly people close them much faster than that, but I'd say on aggregate or on average, that 90-day is a pretty good window to look at.
Yeah, 100%. So explaining all this stuff to me, I'm like, this is why agencies exist, because this is a lot. I mean, it's a lot of work probably for the average investor to learn all the ins and outs of Facebook. So let's say I'm an investor, I'm a wholesaler, I have done maybe 10 deals over the last year. I'm looking to scale my business, and I want to go into online marketing because I see everyone talking about it. How do I decide, one, should I go with an agency like you or me? Should I go learn it myself? How do people make that decision? And how do you think they should be thinking about that decision?
And that's a good question. So I know there are some coaches out there that would tell you, don't ever do it yourself. And I understand why they teach that, because they want you to be focused on what you know and not waste time on what you don't know. And I think that's good advice. I really do. But I would give maybe a slightly nuanced answer to that, which is you have to know what your strengths are and what your strengths are not, and also what your cash situation looks like. So the reality is that hiring an agency to do it will cost you more in cash up front than it will doing it yourself.
Like an extra at least $1,000 a month in fees.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Right. Now, will it cost you more in the long run? Probably not, because you've got to take time to do it, which is an opportunity cost, right? So I guess what I would weigh out is how quickly you want to grow and scale, what time you want to devote to it versus what you want to outsource to others, and then what your like monthly budget looks like. So if you got a smaller monthly budget, then you might either want to consider doing it yourself, or maybe even picking a different marketing avenue that you can enter for cheaper, but if you've got a larger budget, then I think it's worth looking at an agency. Or if digital marketing fires you up and you get excited about it, then personally for me, I don't think there's anything wrong with an investor starting down the path of doing some of it on their own. At some point, if you want to scale your business, you have to be willing to replace yourself either externally or internally. But that's actually, so we personally, we kind of offer a couple of things where we have a course that teaches people how to do it, because there are people who want to know, and there are also people who, even if they're outsourcing it, want to feel like they understand a little bit better what that agency is doing. So I think there's some value in that too. So did I answer your question? I might've gotten a little rambly there.
No, you did. What would you say? You say larger budget, smaller budget. What is that actually? What's the threshold you think someone should have minimum to hire an agency, or no?
I mean, on the Facebook side, I think you got to have a budget of like at least $1,000 to $1,500 a month before you consider hiring an agency. If you're more like, I want to spend $250 to $500, then the challenge with that is that you are going to a lot of that's going to get eaten up by management fee, because the agency's got to make money and the agency's got to take time to run that. So it costs money to hire an agency. And so that's kind of the threshold I'd give.
1,500. I feel like that's a little low. You think so? Like for me, my business, I mean, we're charging not $1,000 a month, but we're close to it. So to me, like, I don't know. I always recommend, I mean, if you're spending 1,500, probably more than half of it's going to go to an agency fee. Do you think that's okay? Do you think to me, it seems a little low, but maybe it's a different avenue or just different perspective?
No, so good question. And so I was trying to go like bare minimum, right? I do think that probably 2K or higher is better. And I guess I would just caveat that with what your expectation is of what you want out of Facebook, right? So I think at like 1,500-ish, you can start generating some leads. You can do some retargeting, but if you want to do like a full on like prospecting campaign, I think you need 2K at least. And probably more is better depending on the size of your market. And again, like what your expectation is of how many leads you want to generate.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. All right, man. I wanted to switch topics here. Are you cool with switching topics? I want to get into, I was trying to think of a segue, but I can't think of any. But like we were talking a little bit beforehand, both of us have been down the W-2 path, I would say, right? Corporate
For sure.
job, full-time
For
job.
sure.
And I would love your take on I guess the pros and cons of how, like if someone is, maybe people listening to this, they're currently working at a full-time job trying to get out of it, or maybe they're doing both. I think in our business, it's glorified to want to work for yourself and work on the computer from the beach and all this stuff. And now a lot of us are working from home, right? From COVID and stuff. I would love your take on like pros and cons from your experience of working for yourself, being an agency owner, business owner versus working for someone else.
Yeah. Let me give you maybe just quick background that will tell you, so I have had the desire to be an entrepreneur most of my life. In college, I had a couple of businesses that I created a couple marketing businesses. I spent time as a recruiter. So I had a business that was like a resume writing and review service. So I started a handful of businesses in my younger years, and then have had multiple marketing jobs as well across several industries. And then back in 2016, like I said, when I started my agency, I was just coming off the heels of being part of a startup. So kind of where I found a niche for myself was working in high growth companies and helping them scale out their marketing and build things out. And that worked really well for me for a long time because it had a lot of the same things that you get as an entrepreneur, which is sort of the fast pace. You get to be really involved in building things and creating things versus being in maybe a more established company where there's a little less flexibility, a little more rigid. But even that I was feeling a little bit burnt out on. And so I left that company and started the agency. And then about halfway into the agency's life, I did a lot of work with a company, and we partnered up on a couple of things. And then I ended up going and working with that company for almost 2 years, which is Carrot. And that's part of how you and I have a connection too. So even while I was running my agency, I also was working as a W-2, with Carrot. But I joined Carrot because of a handful of things. Number one, my relationship with Trevor, who I think most people know is the founder of Carrot. I loved the culture and the vision. And also as Trevor and I were talking about like what Carrot needed and what needed to be done, like all these boxes were checked. I'm like, man, I love that kind of stuff. So for me, it was a unique challenge to say, could I train someone to operate the agency so that I can split my time between Carrot and the agency? But really like 95-5 is how I split it. I worked full time for Carrot, but would also kind of coach the operations side of the agency. And I did that for a couple of years too. And now I'm back full time at the agency. So I just want to kind of give that back and forth because I think it might be helpful as some context. But to get back to the meat of your question, there definitely is often this mindset that a job is bad, or a job is almost like weakness or being trapped. And I reject that idea. I really do. I think it is an oversimplification of things.
You're going to get burned at the stake, Kiley, for saying
I know. But it's funny, right? Because as an entrepreneur, you need people to work in your business unless you want to be a solopreneur and just build yourself a job instead of building yourself a business. If you want to build a business, you need people to come work in that business. The world needs all kinds of people to be awesome. And I think what also happens is when you think that like having a job is inherently bad, then I think you run the risk of really glamorizing life as an entrepreneur. There are a lot of really awesome things about being an entrepreneur, but it isn't inherently good either. You know what I mean? So for me, the more important thing is, how do you find the best way to do things that you feel good about, that give you energy, that you enjoy, versus do I work for a company or do I own my own company? And I don't think there's anything wrong with like having that goal of like, I want to quit my job and start a company. That's awesome. But that doesn't mean that having a job means that you are somehow less than, or that you are missing something. I think both can be incredible. And now some jobs are terrible and they'll suck your soul. And so get out of those jobs and find, have the courage to move and improve your situation. But running a business can also feel that way. So that, I think, speaks to the fact that a lot more of that has to do with what's inside of us than where we're currently making money.
Why do you think people, and I can't speak for other industries, but this is probably the case with other industries, why are people then so excited? And why is there such a movement for people to quit their job and work from home and have that? Financial freedom is a big buzzword, but even time freedom or just options in general. Why is that so enthusiastic? Why is it so popular today that everyone's going after that, if you don't think that it's such a noble thing to do so?
Well, I guess I should back up and say I don't think it's not noble. I just think that it's not totally accurate that like if you're working in a job, you are a slave, that you are inherently less than, right? Or that you are not as brave or whatever. That's the thing I don't agree with. So the question you asked is, why do I think there's such a push for it? I think part of it is like, that's what we've long thought of as part of the American dream, right? Is I can create my own thing. I can make lots of money. I can have all of this freedom. And I also think some of it is because when you get into your working years, you get out of, if you go to college or whatever, you get into your working years, it can start to feel like some doldrum, like a lot of repetition. And you feel like, man, I got to do this for the rest of my life. And so the idea of something being better, I think, is what drives us to do things. And so I do think that idea gets leveraged sometimes as a way to convince people to come over and, take a coaching program or quit their job and go through. So I think marketing plays a role for sure, right? Like, if you can convince someone that what they're currently doing is causing them pain, then what you're offering them feels more appealing.
You could say the same about a beauty company where they sell you a beauty product because they make you feel like you're not good enough the way that you are without the beauty product. Same kind of thing,
Yeah. So here, Tim, let me try to maybe consolidate what I'm saying here. Being an entrepreneur versus having a job in no way changes your worth as a person. And I think that's where we get mixed up. Your worth is not dependent on your productivity. It's not dependent on what you do to make money. Now, if you're doing something like vicious or evil, then maybe that's a different story. If you're making money exploiting people or whatever, but I think that's the piece that often drives us, actually, even if we're unconscious to it, is this idea of like, I'm not enough yet. What I'm doing is not enough. And so I've got to do something else so that I can be enough. And I think we have to work on ourselves to overcome that idea of like, what I do is somehow connected to my value. And that doesn't mean that you can't be super driven and achieve great things. That's awesome. But your worth is not dependent upon that. So if you have a job and you love that job and you hear other people talking about how they're an entrepreneur and they own their own business, like, those people are not better or braver or more amazing. They have just found a way that works better for them.
Oh man, there's like so much to unpack here. I don't know the path to go down. There's so much. I mean, why do you think people feel that way? That why do people tie their you say self-worth to that? Is that just like a cultural thing? Do you think it's from the marketing that's put out or anything else? Do you have a main driver of what you think that would be?
Yeah, I mean, I'm no like psychology expert, right? But I do think that some of that is just based on our own inner mental, like our own internal dialogue, the way we view ourselves. I think some of us seek to find value and approval outside of ourselves to fill gaps and holes that we have in the way we view ourselves or think or talk about ourselves. And it makes sense that one of the main ways we do that is with our career. You know, our career becomes such a huge piece of our identity. And so I think it's a way for us to maybe consciously and subconsciously avoid facing our own imperfections, our own kind of cracks and issues. I do think some of it is marketing and like, I think is a natural outcome of like a society that's built on capitalism is the drive for profit and money. So I think that plays a big role as well. And I think there's nothing wrong with going out and making a bunch of money and creating a bunch of value and having a bunch of profit. But again, there's no additional value in you as a human attached to that. So I've heard it said, and I've seen it in my own life and in others, that money doesn't change you. Money amplifies who you already are. And I thought that was really insightful when I heard that, because I've seen people who are, financially very successful who do incredible things. And then I've seen people who are financially successful that are just miserable and kind of not very great people, So again, like that piece in the future won't fix anything today, and it won't fix anything in the future either. So I feel like I'm rambling a little bit, but if I were to kind of come back and try to summarize it again, what I would say is like being an entrepreneur is awesome. I love it. And, but I would have no problem going back and getting a job somewhere again, if it were the right place and it provided me a lot of freedom, because these are things that I need and I'm used to now. Because my value of who I am is not attached to being an entrepreneur.
Why do you think this is important to talk about? Why should we even, because you don't hear people talk about it very much. Why should we be talking about it?
Man, I think mental health is something that's still, even though it's becoming more and more talked about, I still think it's something that's really probably misunderstood and often stigmatized. And in the entrepreneurial world, I think definitely so. And so I think it's important to, we strive so hard to understand how business works, how marketing works, how customers think. And I think we do ourselves a great service when we try just as hard to understand our own brains, our own makeup, our own, like what makes us tick. Yeah. What are our weaknesses? What are the things that we can work on? Dude, I think the older I get, I turn 40 next week, which kind of blows my mind. But the older I get, Tim, the more I think that so much of life is trying to be self-aware of our own issues so that we don't project those onto other people in all aspects of our life, in our family, in our business, in church, or whatever it is. So that's one of the reasons I think it's important. The other reason I think it's important is if you are going to start a business, I think it's important you come in as eyes wide open as you can. I think starting a business is one of those things that you can learn a lot about, but the best way you're going to really realize what it's all about is doing it. Like there are certain things you can't quite fully explain to someone, but if you can come in eyes wide open about your motivation for starting that business, I think that's super helpful. And so if you can come into that from a more healthy mindset, then I think that matters. So if you start a business thinking like, I've got to start a business in order to make my life better, I think that's risky, man. And because I think, leaving a job that's no good for you, that and doing something that you're more passionate about can and will make your life better, but it won't be a magic bullet, because at the end of the day, it's still you, it's still the other people around you. And so if you can come into that eyes wide open, I think that benefits you greatly. And I think you'll be a better entrepreneur and a much better leader too, if you end up having people on your team.
I think I want to share a story about myself at some point here, like, because I can relate a lot to what you're saying. But everything you're saying sounds great, but I'm thinking, like, what are the actionable items? Like, I don't think most people would say, I don't want to be more self-aware about myself. I think people would like to know if they're driving towards something that may be not good for their mental health. How do you think people, again, neither of us are like therapists or anything like that, but like, what would you do? What would you recommend your friends to do of like, hey, I'm thinking about starting a business. Are my intentions pure? Are they not? How do people go down this path to open their eyes?
That's a really good question. And yeah, I don't know. I think if we took some time, you and I might be able to come up with like a good list for a blog post or something, right? But yeah, I think it's worth taking the time to sit down and verbalize and or write down what you want out of that business or what you expect out of that business, and be really honest with yourself. Because then you can evaluate those expectations, and how you evaluate those expectations is probably another story. But I think take a step back, and if you're currently thinking that starting a business is the answer to all the troubles in your life, I would just challenge that thought challenge that thought personally and go, okay, like what can starting my own business actually do for me? What are some realistic expectations of what it can do and what it can help? And then what are some things that I have to keep working on inside of myself? And then on that note, I think as you look around for tools and resources on starting your business, like anything that sort of claims to have to be a silver bullet, or to have all the answers, like, be healthily skeptical of that. It's probably really good, but there are very few, if any, silver bullets in life,
Yeah. Let me share a story here, like from my own personal experience. So, and I wish I did this getting started. Probably a lot of people have similar stories. So I read Rich Dad Poor Dad, checked that off the box of me and a million other investors, went into the business, didn't grow up with a lot of money. I have had anxiety for years. I'm kind of an introverted, anxiety driven person. And for me, I had this dream since I was in college of, I want to, because I didn't grow up with a lot of money, I want to be financially free. I don't want to have this money pain. I want to be successful. I want people to respect me, to be proud of me. I want to be proud of myself. Right. And honestly, that drove me down the path of like, it's what motivated me to work hard. I got into the real estate business and, starting to wholesale and all that kind of stuff. And it came to a point probably 3 years into the business. So this was 3 years ago, 2018, where I reached a certain level of success and a certain level of misery as well. Coming to the terms, not I didn't want to come to terms with it, but I kind of had to, that I was unhappy with this lifestyle that I purposely went after. And I got very depressed, and it was very difficult for me. I wrote a whole blog post, is called "Anyone Who Tells You That Wholesaling is Easy is Trying to Sell You Something." And I go over in detail, like, my experience of like, well, this has been pretty hard for me. And it came down to a few factors. One is the up and down income. And that's partially like, your ability as a business owner. But like in this industry specifically, the income can be inconsistent. No matter how good you are, it's just the nature of the deals. And then also the certain level of loneliness of working for yourself as well. If you don't have a team with you, I was kind of a solo guy. So those two things put together I didn't realize it. It was kind of like when you put a frog in like a, they say you put a frog in like the water and it starts boiling, and then like the frog doesn't realize it's boiling until it's too late. It's that kind of thing. You don't realize what's going on until one day you wake up and you're like, oh, I'm like actually really, really unhappy. And I think some of that could have been prevented if I knew going into it, hey, this wholesaling business model or this, whatever program I took wasn't going to cure me of my anxiety. It wasn't going to cure me of these certain things I felt way before I went into business. So yeah, me personally, I 100% agree with what you're saying. And I see it too. Like I see a lot of people, even friends that I know, who like are getting into the business. And this is one reason why I started this podcast, right? They're people getting into the business and they just like expect an easier life, a more stress-free life, like after they reach XYZ. And it's just not true. It just isn't true, in my opinion. So, yeah. Do you have any thoughts on that? I try not to ramble too much because I'm bringing you on the podcast.
No, that's good, because people are going to get tired of me. They're going to go, what is he even talking about? No, I appreciate you sharing that, Tim. And to be clear, like I have a very similar story, which is why I have thought about this the way that I have, and I was making a couple of notes while you were talking, just because some thoughts were coming to me, but I don't know, a couple of things in there, I guess, which is just how we take care of ourselves, so whatever that looks like for you out there, for me, for you, Tim, like how do we take care of ourselves from our health? So physical, mental, spiritual, if you go that route, how do you take care of yourself, and what are you investing in that? And again, it's interesting, as I get older, I realize how important it is to invest in that time, resources, whatever, to make sure that I'm, because the risk is, and I find myself doing this often, the risk is that we're always chasing something. And we think that happiness or contentment or whatever is just around the corner as soon as we catch this thing. But the reality is, once we catch it, we might have a feeling of arrival or whatever for a bit, but then that will like dissipate. Yeah, and then we're chasing again, right? And so I think it's really tough to balance that, like the innate drive and desire to achieve, which is a good thing, I think, and a healthy thing, without attaching happiness or contentment or more than anything, maybe personal worth to that achievement. So you can still drive and achieve and grow, but not holding on to this idea of like, okay, things are going to be less stressful, or things are going to be better, I'm going to be more happy, or whatever that you might be telling yourself once this thing is in place. The idea is that the future is never a solution to the present, because as soon as we arrive there, this is now getting maybe a little like philosophical here, but like the only time that really exists is right now. We can learn from the past, we can set goals for the future, but we can't ever hold the future, because as soon as we have it, it's now the present. So if we can't figure out how to feel good in the present, we will always be chasing the future.
So you've been on both sides of it. You run a successful agency by, I think, anyone's standards. It's successful. You've also worked at a corporate job. Were you, which one made you happier? Let's say that. Which one made you feel more worthy as a person?
Well, that's the trick, man, and that's what I'm realizing, is that neither one is the answer, right? Because when I've worked jobs, even jobs that I really enjoyed, there are things that drove me nuts, man. Like all the things that you could sit anyone down and be like, hey, why don't you like your job? Like, it's like, I have too many meetings, or my boss he keeps doing this thing that's like driving me nuts. He won't let me do what I want to do. Like things aren't clicking the way I want them to, or I hate my commute, or whatever. But then there are things that I've absolutely loved and experience I would never trade. But Tim, candidly, the same is true for my business. there are times where I love my business and I'm always grateful for it, but there are times where that's easier to find that gratitude. And there are times where I feel really frustrated by it, and I realize like I'm not any happier now with my business of, I've been running for 6+ years and am in a different place financially than I've ever been in my life. And, but I still have challenges and troubles that didn't magically go away, and I think for me, the idea, so the awesome thing about entrepreneurship and that we live in a place where we have the flexibility to do this is that you have the choice, right? That's awesome. But that doesn't mean that either choice is right or better. And so you can find fulfillment in a lot of things and in a lot of ways. So I know that was a long-winded answer, but I would say neither. Like now, like candidly, because I'm wired, quote, wired like, most entrepreneurs, where it is harder for me to work for someone. Mm-hmm. But because I don't get to make all the decisions. But to be honest, there's also times where that's kind of nice, where I can just focus on like a craft that I really want to work on, and someone else will maybe make some of the decisions. But when you get to a certain level in corporate jobs too, like you have a ton of autonomy and flexibility as well. So I've enjoyed both. I could see myself doing both in the future. For me, it's more about continuing to figure out what gives me energy, what I enjoy doing, how I can have a positive impact on people and things. Versus that is the more of a driver for me than would I go back and take a job somewhere? Because the answer to that question is like, if I knew if someone approached me and was like, hey, check out this thing we're doing and it's so cool and here's why and here's the role you would play and here's the impact you'd get to have, like I'd for sure have that conversation. But I don't need it. I'm happy running my business too.
What would you say is less stressful? Is either one less stressful than the other or no?
Man, I don't know. I think probably having a job is less stressful in aggregate. Mostly because you're probably worried less often, especially like in the beginning of a business, you're worried less often about the financial aspect,
Yeah.
As an entrepreneur, I've seen this funny graphic. You maybe seen it too. It's like a graph. It's like, here's the journey of an entrepreneur. And like at the top, you're like, this is the greatest thing ever. Like I'm on top of the world. I'm going to take more market share. I'm going to be the best. And then like the next day you're like, oh my gosh, this thing is burning to the ground, So I think you have less of that when you're working somewhere, but you replace other stress in there, the stress of maybe feeling like if you're feeling like you're tapped out or you don't have the opportunity or growth that you want or whatever. So I think you're kind of trading different stresses.
I think it's a good way to put it. It's all trade-offs. And, for anyone who doesn't know, like me and Kiley met through like Carrot, right? I work at Carrot. I'm a W-2 employee with them. Maybe people have seen me on some of their videos or whatnot. And I choose to work for them still. I have my own agency and my whole wholesaling business, but there's certain, at least with this, kind of a unique company maybe, but there's certain trade-offs. And when I was saying like in 2018, I got to a point where I was pretty unhappy. I chose and gratefully had an opportunity to work for Carrot because it gave me some stability financially, like you're talking about. I mean, up and down, it wasn't there as much. And then working with the team as well. Like, so for me, there are positive reasons that maybe looking on the outside in the frame of our industry of everyone wants to sit on the beach all day. Like, why would you go work for a company when you don't have to do so? And for me, those are some of the benefits of working at a certain companies. So yeah, man. Anything else you have to say on? I feel like there are a lot of things you said. I'm like, oh, I want to dive down that path, but I can't remember them all off the top of my head. Is there anything else?
Yeah, man, maybe just one other thought, and we've kind of touched on this already, but I think for entrepreneurs looking to get into REI, or I guess other entrepreneurs too, if any part of you is thinking like this is going to be easy or easier, that's a thought I would challenge, and let go of that expectation that it should be easy, and
It's not true.
embrace. Yeah, it's not true. And embrace the idea that it's going to be challenging, but the challenge should be what you're looking forward to as well. If it's really for you and it's really what you're going to do, like part of the fun is the challenge, part of the and the growth that you get from that. So I think so much of our pain in business and in life is from unmet expectations. So if we can figure out how to adjust our expectations, then we that's huge. And especially when you're getting going, and again, that kind of comes full circle for me back to this idea of like, if you're sitting in a job right now and the message you've told yourself is, my life is not good right now, but if I can quit this job and start a business, my life is going to be great. Like, kudos to you for wanting to improve your situation and take that leap of faith, because it does take courage and it does take a lot of hard work. But I would just challenge you to rethink that thought of like, my life will be great once I do this, and realize that it's a journey, and there's a lot of things that are not going to change, or that you'll just be trading one for the other. So your ability to work through that and find joy in the present is truly the challenge.
This is like, it's something that is really like the core reason why I even have this podcast. And the previous episode that I have with Greg, we were talking about his journey. He's a young guy, younger than us, but I asked him, his stress levels now compared to when he first started in the business back when he was in college? And they're so much higher now. And he's more successful. He's like where people want to be. And even for me, it's the same. Like, I handle more stress today than I ever did in my entire life. And I think it needs to be drilled into people to combat the marketing out there that says this is not the case, and my XYZ product or service will show you how, because I just think it's extremely misleading. And there are certain things that are better, but there are trade-offs. The whole picture is not necessarily better, and I just think that needs to be really drilled into people 100%. So I'm glad that you are talking about it. It gets me worked up, to be honest, that and it causes so much pain to people,
Yeah. I mean, people will invest a lot of money to start a business, right? Whether it's REI or otherwise. And so, man, come into that with eyes wide open, like try to really understand expectations, realistic timelines, the amount of work it's going to take. Because then you come into it ready for the challenge, and it is a great and fun and rewarding challenge. But it's not easy. It's often not quick. And it's not a silver bullet to unhappiness or feeling unfulfilled or whatever.
Or feeling enough,
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So for me, and this is a quote I heard, Trevor said it, I think, on a random Instagram, and it always stuck with me, is your level of success. I would define success as like achievement, career-based. Your level of success is directly related to the amount of stress you can handle. And I thought that was really interesting for me. And this is just my own personal experience, but over the last 2 years, I've invested in a personal coach. It's like a performance men's coach type of thing. And the main focus is how to deal with anxiety. That's literally it. It's nothing about hiring, nothing about business, marketing, any of that stuff. Literally, I go to him and say, this is stressing me out. And then we work through it. And it's like a daily thing. And I've been doing it for 2 years. And that process for me has made more of a difference to me financially on the success side of things than anything else I've ever done in my life.
It's awesome.
And in the past, I've realized probably 2016 through 2018, I plateaued where my business was like, I was doing 15 to 20 deals a year, which I'm happy about. I'm proud of myself for, but I plateaued. And I think the reason is because I would reach a level where I would have to deal with more stress to get to the next level. And I would kind of like, I think subconsciously self-sabotage myself because I wasn't willing to handle the stress. It was too much for me. I couldn't deal with it. I'd be like, no, no, no. I would back out of it and stop working as hard or whatever. But since I've been able to work through that, now I can actually go to that next level, take on, a higher 3 times as many people. And that's what it takes. And it's more stressful, but you can learn how to deal with it in different ways. So kind of circling back here, even to the marketing a little bit, as investors or marketers, what do you think are some ways people can manage some of their own kind of anxiety or difficulties that may be troubling them? If you have any good ideas there.
Oh man. Yeah, I'm with you. That's so important. And again, I'll caveat this with like, I'm not a mental health professional, but I do think that just recognizing that that it's there is a good, important step. And recognizing that it's playing a role in your life and it's impacting. So one of the first things and most important things we can do, I think, is just recognize it, stop hiding from it. And we all hide from it in different ways. We might use coping mechanisms. We might, I think perfectionism is sometimes a result of that we're trying to hide from that and trying to be perfect and seek out other people's approval to kind of fill those cracks or those gaps. So recognizing it and then invest in understanding it and working to manage it better. And there's a lot of ways I think you can do that. So, I'm a huge advocate, by the way, and I'll just say this for anyone listening, like if you are feeling like overwhelmed, trapped, and you need help, like get help. There is zero shame or weakness in seeking help from a professional. It can be incredibly empowering and liberating. And again, your worth is not tied to that. So if there's anyone listening to this that needs to hear that, I hope I can be that voice. So, that's one of the ways you can do that is you can get help. And Tim, that might look like a coach like you have, that might look like a counselor or a therapist. That might mean just going to your spouse or your partner or a friend and just saying like, hey, I don't think I'm okay. Like, I think, and just acknowledging that, man, can be so powerful.
I will say, just to interject, to add to that point, I was at a real estate mastermind, and one of my greatest takeaways, so people were sharing like the things that have helped them the most. One of them literally said therapy was what turned his business around more than anything else. He was struggling mentally, and he got a therapist who was basically, because he was trying to take care of everyone else and no one was taking care of him. And the therapist allowed him to kind of let go some of his own shit that he had. And that ultimately was what turned his business around. I'm like, that is so true.
Yeah. I believe that. That's awesome. It's cool. So yeah, I mean, I think that's something you can do there. There are lots of ways I think you can pour into yourself. There are books you can read that are helpful around like better psychological literacy, let's call it. And
anyone you would recommend in particular, you think are good, have helped you?
Oh man, it's a good question. So I'll just tell you, like right now, my wife has gotten me onto Brené Brown, the author. Some people might know her from her TED Talks. I've read a couple of her books now, and I think they're super impactful and helpful. The Gifts of Imperfection and Daring Greatly have been awesome. I've really enjoyed them. So I like that. I like reading. I resonate with like Stoic mentality. So I've read some of Ryan Holiday's books. Like The Obstacle is the Way is a great one. And what's the other one? It's Stillness is the Key. So those are a couple that I've read recently that I've enjoyed. And there's other things like around mindfulness, meditation, etc. I think one of the best things we can do, man, is disconnect our brains from technology, intentionally do that more often. So
stop watching this podcast right now. Turn it off. Go take a walk.
just put it in your ear and go for a walk. You can still listen to us, but no, there's lots of research and studies out there of like what social media does to our brain and how it kind of floods us with, I'm not a professional, right? But it kind of floods our brains with dopamine and I actually recently did like, if anyone's listening to this in real time that follows me on social media, maybe someone, I don't know, maybe someone's noticed like, wow, Kiley like hasn't posted anything in a long time. It's kind of weird. He works as a Facebook marketer. Like I took a break from social media, especially from my phone. I deleted them all off my phone for a few weeks. And it was wild, man. It was wild how often I would pick up my phone and like almost without thinking, like start navigating to where social media would be on my phone. And then I'd be like, oh yeah, it's not here. And then I'd almost catch myself feeling a little like anxious. And that's our brain going like, give me that dopamine. I want that dopamine hit from the social media. So I took a break from that, which I do that every once in a while, which I think is super helpful. And then the last one that has been a game changer for me is exercise on a regular basis. That there's a direct correlation for me personally of how well I feel and how often I'm exercising.
I would 100%. And that's something it's such a simple thing. And everyone's like, duh, okay, everyone knows they need to exercise, but it actually you don't do it to get a six pack. You do it because it makes your anxiety levels go down. That's the reason. For me, it's been huge to try to, at least for me, 3 times a week. It's important, 100%. Do you, and we'll wrap this up here in a few minutes. Is there any, camera's a little foggy. Is there any like ethics that you're, saying Facebook, is can be addicting? You're a Facebook marketer. Couldn't you argue you're contributing to the problem?
Oh yeah, man. In fact, that's something I've been thinking about a lot. It's, in the marketing world, we refer to that as the realization that you are feeding the beast. So, yeah, for sure, dude. I think about that often and sometimes get a little like existential in my thought process of like, what good am I putting into the world? And yeah, so yeah, it is something I think about often. I want anything I do to be contributing to good and not to noise. So we try to make sure that any marketing we're putting out in the world is honest, is straightforward, is ethical, is not just noise.
Right. And that's that's why I think we're good friends, because I have the same philosophy. That's one reason why I want to do a podcast specifically. That I think that medium is not as like there's not as much noise. I mean, there's a million podcasts, but it's not as like addicting, right? And like an hour-long conversation. I think YouTube as well for certain things can have like really good, like long, informative, like honest conversations. So that's kind of where I stick to versus like, yo, look at me, I'm on the beach today, So the last question I have for you. I mean, you work with a lot of investors. A lot of them are probably very, very successful. Is there anything that you've seen that is maybe like a catch-22 or like a gotcha, or like something that you've seen either contribute to people's success, their failure, their happiness or unhappiness that you don't think is talked about enough?
Are we talking like financial success, the success of their business?
It could be anything. It doesn't have to be mental health. So it could be marketing. It could be anything.
Yeah. I mean, we talked about some of that. Like, I would say just there are people who have been at it a few years that I think kind of come to this realization of like, oh, this didn't fix everything. But trying to, and then they have to kind of reassess moving forward. But, sorry, let me make sure I understand the question. You're asking like any kind of catch-22s, things that people didn't anticipate, right? Is that what you're thinking?
Any type of variable that you've seen that maybe just like isn't in standard social media, how to be successful stuff that you're like, Like I see this as a pattern among my clients or whatnot, or just in marketing in general that you think people should be aware of. I know it's an open end. I'm putting the burden on you to figure out what I'm trying to say, honestly.
Yeah, that's a good question. I think I got a couple here. So I think one of those is that at some point you're going to need to learn some of the fundamentals of business.
Yes. I'm sorry. I'm cutting you off right there. This makes me so happy. So one thing that I like, a couple other my podcast episodes, and I just talked about it with Greg too. I'm telling you guys, this is the truth. Everybody says the same thing. I didn't prep him for that, but like the fundamentals of business is so important. And for me, transitioning from a wholesaler to an agency owner, I realized how much I didn't know about business. And even talking with Greg, the other day, it's the previous episode, said the same thing. Like, you need to understand business, operational skills, all of those things in order to be successful. I'm sorry I cut you off, but it just excited me you said that.
No, well, yeah, you said it well, man. Like that's what it is, right? So I think, depending on how people enter this industry, some people might enter it thinking like, I can just make some money. And yeah, you can make money. You can make great money in real estate. But if you want to do all the things kind of you and I have been talking about, which is like manage stress well and scale and have it last, then you've got to be willing to learn those fundamentals for sure. And then the other thing I would say, and this one is maybe more, this one is both financial and non-financial when it comes to success, I think is reassessing on a regular basis why you're doing it and what is enough, which is such a hard question. It's a hard question for anyone, but I think especially for an entrepreneur, because the risk we all run, is that it's never enough. So you're constantly like, I can do more deals, I can make more money. And that in and of itself, at least in my experience, there's no end to that. And so you can find yourself chasing. And if you're not figuring out how to find fulfillment, joy, and happiness along the way, you'll chase. And that's how you get, on like these people who are wildly, quote, successful at the end of their life, like all of a sudden saying things that like kind of think everything they did in their life, they're like, I should have done things different. I should have spent more time with my family, whatever it is. So,
enjoy the journey kind of type of thing, right?
Yeah. But I'd say even more specifically than that, like stop and think. If you're trying to hit a new revenue threshold, why do you want to hit that revenue threshold? And for me personally, I think it's got to be more than just, well, because then I'll have more money. I think I would challenge you to think of like what that really means and why you want to do it. And I'm not saying don't do it. I'm saying do it, but have like, make sure you understand why you're doing it and that you also understand the cost to get there, the cost of the challenge, the cost of stress, the cost of investment, whatever it might be to get there. The last thing I would say too, and this one's maybe a touch more anecdotal, but like, the people I talk to who seem to really enjoy what they do, and like enjoy people and like solving problems for people, they seem to be a little more content and happy, just from my observation, than the people who are mostly focused on how much they can get off of each transaction. As a business owner, you have to focus on that. You have to know like what your revenue per transaction is and maximize that. But the people who, again, seem the most like happy, well-adjusted are the people who also really enjoy and really believe that they can provide value to people.
There's a book Trevor's mentioned. I don't know if you read it, The Infinite Game. I know they've talked about that book a lot. So the basic 2-sentence premise is by Simon Sinek, the Start With Why guy. And it basically is like, business is a game. It's not like basketball. People treat it like basketball, but basketball has an end. There's a time limit. There's a clear opponent, and business is not like that. It's infinitely long. It never ends. So how can you have the mindset of how do I play this infinite game, which is a game that literally never ends? And a lot of it goes back to like, you have to enjoy the journey, because the game literally there is no end to it. You can make an end, I guess, if you have like a revenue goal and then leave it. But if you like the business, you need to treat it and this is for me what has helped shift my perspective and help me be happier is like, yeah, I have revenue goals for my business and whatnot, but I constantly check myself of, am I enjoying the journey? Because then it really doesn't matter. And I purposely, intentionally try to do things that are fun. And that's why I started this business, my agency business, because I literally enjoy helping people with pay-per-click marketing. As like dull as that may sound to some people, I enjoy it. I didn't enjoy the wholesaling aspect of it, even that probably could make me more money. And that's why I started this business. And I think it's important for people to do what you enjoy. And that is more important than like a revenue target that will always be a new revenue target, you know? So
that sounds fascinating. That book, I'll have to check it out.
Yeah, Infinite Game. I think you would resonate with it for sure. The last point I want to ask you is, you mentioned like learning the fundamentals of business. What would you say would be those specific fundamentals, and how do you think people like should start learning about them? Like, again, maybe just like quick tips on books or something. I know it's a huge question, but like, what would you say to that?
Yeah, man, that's a good question. So have some sort of accounting plan going into it. So for my agency, I used the Profit First plan.
Same, Profit First. I'm going to have a guy who's writing a Profit First to Real Estate Investors book. He's going to be upcoming on the podcast too. So Profit First, Mike McAllowitz, great book.
That's awesome. Yeah. And I, 6 years into it, still use a variation of that. It's become a little bit more complex, but still like that is a driving principle for me. I think maybe understand some of the fundamentals of marketing and sales, or at least be willing to continually try to learn and grow in those are important. Be willing to understand, like you said, on the operations side, and even if it's just at the very basic level, like the importance of having some sort of CRM system, for example. And that's not me advocating that you need to go pay for a system, but like that you're keeping track of your leads and following up on them in an effective way. So yeah, those are kind of, I'm sure there are others that I'm forgetting, man, but those are the ones that kind of come to mind right away. When you get fired up about this, what are the ones, did I miss some big ones?
Like a team, like team building potentially, depending on how big you want to grow. But like, I've learned a lot. I have a theme every year, and 2021 is the year of leadership. That's my theme. So I'm reading books about leadership, and it's helped me like how I schedule meetings with my team, like things that people maybe don't want to talk about and why they quit their job. But I genuinely like want to help my team, how to have an employee development program, making sure that, being aware of the turnover, how to prevent that from happening. Like these things are important and will largely affect the quality of your life. If you hate the person you're working with, it's not going to be fun.
Or if you can't keep people on your team for whatever reason, right?
I think, that's a big one. I honestly go ahead.
Oh, Tim, I was just going to add a thought in there. Like for what it's worth, if you have a belief inside of you that employees are somehow lesser than because they're not entrepreneurs, that might impact the way you treat them. So
it's interesting dichotomy, because like if a lot of us are trying to escape the rat race, escape the 9 to 5, but you're intentionally creating 9 to 5 jobs for the team under you. Right. So
yes. And for a lot of people, when you're creating those, your expectations are like the exact same that you would have just bucked against, if you're in that seat. So it's interesting, right? Like, how do you create a job that someone will enjoy? Not that you would enjoy because you're a different person, right? But I agree. That's an interesting dichotomy. And again, I think if you believe like someone who's an employee, like they haven't evolved enough yet, then you challenge that thought, because you're going to find you'll find you'll connect better with people, you'll treat people better, you'll create better environments for people, etc. It can't be all about you. It can't be all about you.
Yes, it's like a servant mindset in a way, like how can you serve your team? And that's in a way, like the more successful you want to be, you have to almost give up some of your freedom to help your team out and like really serve them. I personally believe that, at least. And we don't want to become the bosses that we hate and why we quit in the first place. It's just it's like the cycle, and then our employees
Yeah.
quit, start their own thing, and then they hire.
Yeah.
What
Yeah.
are some things that you do in your business with your team that you have, where you try to make sure you're not the boss everybody hates?
I try to give people a ton of flexibility and autonomy, and trust people to make good decisions. And we know what the desired outcomes are, but the path to get to that desired outcome is flexible. And I think that probably comes from a place of that's something that's really important for me. So it's probably what I drive for other people. I also personally try to not take the business too seriously. And maybe to a fault sometimes, candidly, as I look into myself, where I am rarely like upset or anything like that. I just feel like problems can be solved other ways than that way. Like I said, I think some people sometimes would maybe look at that and go, you could be a little more fired up sometimes. I get excited, but I don't try to lead with as much like negative emotion,
Mm-hmm.
And then appreciation. I hope that the people I work with would say this, that they feel appreciated and that they feel valued and important, and that their contributions matter. So I would hope. It's really easy for me to sit here and say all of that. And I would hope that the people I work with would echo some of those thoughts. And if they're listening to this and you are saying like, Kiley, what are you talking about? Then send me a Slack and let's fix that.
That's a good boss quote right there. I like that, man. Is there anything else that you like to share, man? I appreciate you coming on. I love this candid talk we had. Any final thoughts? Anything we didn't cover that you just want to get out in the open before we close this up?
Oh man. Man, we covered so much good stuff, Tim, and I hope that what we said today had some value for some people and resonated with some people. Maybe I just add, like, if anyone wants to connect after this and talk, like, I'm always up for a good conversation. I love connecting with people and chatting, and yeah, take care of yourselves. I know I already said that, but I think that's probably a thought I'd like to say again is just be kind to yourself, take care of yourself. And I know we're talking to entrepreneurs, so as you're chasing and grinding and working, make sure that you're scheduling time to step back and just appreciate yourself, take care of yourself, invest in your own well-being, and you'll be better off. And I think the people around you be better off as well.
I think that's great to end on, man. Appreciate it. Couldn't have said it better myself. Thanks for having you on, and let's do this again sometime.
Thanks, Tim. I'd love to. It was awesome.
Thanks, Kiley. See ya.
See ya.